How's it going, fellas? It's the 1970s.
Pretty groovy.
This is Boob Tube Boys. It's a TV show podcast hosted by three people, more specifically me this week, Brian Vaughn, alongside Van Lee.
Can I give a hearty
Ooh-doo-doo-doo. There you go, a little fluttering. Yeah. And we have Spencer Hendricks. Do you have any sound effects you'd like to make?
Oh, I don't make sound effects. I will say that intro is the most cheerful and uplifting of all the shows we've done so far.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, no other show told us we were going to make it. No other show had that mentality.
If you just listen to the lyrics, I agree with you. But when you have boo-doo-doo-doo and all that, it just makes me feel
sad.
A little sad.
There's
I'm
a certain
happy.
Wistfulness to it that
I don't feel that. I don't feel it at all.
I think you could interpret that feeling, though, either direction, because I do get a certain amount of excitement out of wistfulness.
Yeah, and I mean, it's calming. It is definitely that.
Yeah.
But it just feels like I want to sit down and think about the things I've done wrong.
Huh.
That's what the music makes me want to do.
I wouldn't choose that soundtrack for doing that.
Well, maybe someone could do the same thing and think about things they've done right. Not you, Van. You've not done enough things right.
That column's empty.
There's never really a time that you want to sit down and reflect on that, though. Like, let's sit down and think about all the great things I've done.
I think people do, though, but I think those are the assholes. I think those are the people who
they must
like
do
a Trump type would like he's in bed and he's like, I can't do a Trump,
now
but I'm so good.
Now I'm thinking of Trump listening to that song and sitting there talking about how great he is.
Of course I'm going to make it. I'm rich already. Piece of shit.
Instead of throwing his hat, he throws his toupee.
I like this.
Well, the podcast is already ruined. We've talked about the worst person.
Yeah, we should never bring him up.
But we're not only going to talk about the worst person today, probably. We're also going to talk about The Mary Tyler Moore Show, a sitcom that ran from 1970 to 1977. Years that none of us were alive for, years that the Waltons also ran.
I'm going to ruin this already. You were just on such a roll. I'm going to put a stop to it, Brian.
I like that. That's how I like this podcast. I like screeching halts and unexpected turns and
it's
ugly
rare.
noises.
It's rare that any of us are truly going to get to fully finish our thought, and that's just the way it is.
Well, you're not going to like this. Maybe a little, because we got a new rate and review on Apple Podcasts, and I'd like to read it.
Oh,
Spencer,
go ahead and read it to me.
I wasn't going to, but you made it too irresistible, so yes, I looked at it.
You did look at it?
Yeah, I couldn't help it.
You.
I couldn't help it.
What's the reviewer have to say?
It is a 5-star review from Wizard Gandalf 69, which is utterly hilarious.
So at first, I'm like, this person is cool at first.
It's the subject line is, I like it.
Still
we got 5
cool.
stars. They like it. And they say, I listened to probably 5 episodes before I realized the one wasn't just a really lewd girl.
How'd that make you feel, Van?
They're funny. I laughed my ass off when I read
know
it.
this whole time he's thought you were a girl.
Oh, I see what you're doing there.
Oh, I did a switcheroo.
I read it to Katie, and she was like, oh, okay. And like everyone knows which person that's about. Spencer.
I don't really get why a girl couldn't be lewd, though. I mean, aren't we at a
really
point,
lewd?
Aren't we at a point now where we agree that men and women are all the same at being lewd?
Well, you and I do. Brian doesn't.
Yeah, that bigot.
I would also argue I'm not that lewd.
I don't think so.
Podcast person.
You're a little lewd.
I don't feel like it. I feel like we're all inappropriate in equal measure.
Yeah, but I don't even think this podcast is that lewd compared to some podcasts.
Well, I cut out a lot too, so I know how lewd we are. So maybe that's why I had the
Who gives us
thought.
the explicit rating? Do we have to say it's explicit, or does it just get assigned that?
I used to do that. I'm not doing that anymore because I think it harms downloads, and I don't care.
I mean, it is
We
very
don't say that
explicit.
many. We don't say that many fucks.
Well,
A handful of
let
fucks.
me say this first off. Thank you, Gandalf. We very much appreciate your review. That rules. So much so that I'm going to take it as a compliment because I think women are very powerful.
And
Exactly.
lewd.
And very lewd.
And
really
so am I.
lewd.
Sequel to Mean Girls, lewd girls.
Everybody's always saying how powerful and lewd I am.
Well, the good news is tonight, since these are your shows, you're on the good mic, so you automatically have more depth to your voice.
A little more heft. That is absolutely true.
Leave us a rate and review, by the way.
Yeah, do it. People have been doing it lately, and we love it. It makes us feel real nice inside and outside. I think there's a palpable glow about all three of us. That's what that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've established neither of you know anything about the Mary Tyler Moore Show, really, right?
Mhm.
Nope.
I do now.
Well,
now I've
sure.
seen 2 episodes.
You would have to now. Well, as you guys also know about me, I spent a lot of time watching the Mary Tyler Moore Show on Nick at Night as a child. Basically any 70s sitcom. Once that wave of shows started hitting Nick at Night.
You're a big fan of the Bob Newhart show.
Yes,
I know that.
I am. And Taxi, and
Taxi I'd
the
like
Mary
to
Tyler
see.
Moore Show. Oh, we'll cover it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
To my point on that, Taxi, another show created by James L. Brooks, who, along with Alan Burns, created the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
See, I think of him as the Simpsons guy. I didn't really realize he was this successful before, because that also doesn't seem like the timeline would work out. But I guess it does.
This was his first hit. This was his first big wave-making show.
Well, how old would he have been? Like a teen?
20s, probably.
He's still
I
pretty young.
think.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd imagine you guys do know kind of the reputation of the Mary Tyler Moore Show at this point in time.
I thought it was well received, but you implied that it was very well received.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, especially at the time, still now, and especially in historical context. But it was it was also kind of a cultural show in a way. A lot of women felt empowered by seeing a working woman on TV, which somehow
Working woman!
which wasn't really happening at the time.
I knew it was a big deal for that very reason, that this
Yeah.
was the first time we'd seen a single woman who was in the workforce, and it wasn't, shame on her or whatever.
Yeah, and there were a lot of pains to make her fashionable. Like they had a lot of consultants come in to make sure she was wearing like stuff considered cool at the time, things
Really?
like that. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the other things about the show that caught on essentially was having a diverse cast of women also. Like the show starting out with multiple women from different backgrounds. And we'll get into that more when we get to the cast. Essentially, the show happened because of two things. Mary Tyler Moore had done the Dick Van Dyke Show. She was
Was that a sitcom, by the
Yes.
way? Okay.
And she was Laura, his wife in the show. And a few years had passed, and she was kind of she tried doing some plays, and she tried doing variety shows, which were kind of big on TV at the time.
Like Laugh In?
Yeah, things like that. But she wasn't really finding the same success as before, despite being a big name. And at the same time, she was married to a guy named Grant Tinker, which is a real name, who was a network exec who was interested in her finding the right project. Like they were both legitimately on the same page there.
Oh, okay.
So simultaneously, James L. Brooks and Alan Burns come up with this idea for the Mary Tyler Moore Show after spending time as staff writers on other shows, including like My Mother the Car.
Oh, boy.
But they were just taking whatever job they could get as a tandem, like a writing team. And they eventually helmed a show called Room 222. I watched a few clips from it, and it doesn't seem that, revolutionary to me, but at the time it was considered like, oh, they're really blending drama and comedy.
Oh, that's the one where Jim Carrey realizes everything adds up to 224.
Yeah, but the whole time he's smoking. That's it, I think, right?
Yeah,
the
that's the one.
Majestic.
Somebody stop me.
So they're doing that show at this point, and the idea they have is for a single woman in her 30s to get divorced and move to a bigger city to pursue like her actual aspirations, not to start a family. So that was the impetus for the show. They wanted two things: to show a working single woman not dependent on a man, and they wanted it to take place in a city because at this time in the early 1970s and certainly in the 60s, and we mentioned this with the Waltons, a lot of the programming focus was on rural shows.
Yeah, like Green Acres and stuff of that ilk.
That's exactly one of them. Like the big TV night back then was Saturdays, which seems really weird to me. Let's all stay home and watch TV on Saturday
It's
night.
the one day we can do whatever we want. Let's do this.
Everybody knows on Saturday nights, you put on your best shirt and tie and you go podcast. That's what we do.
That works. We're wearing shirts and ties.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we wear overalls, right, man?
I thought about wearing them again tonight, but I didn't. Is that what happened with the story of Mary Tyler Moore, the show? Is she a divorced woman?
No.
Okay, that I didn't get that vibe. So I was curious.
Yeah, so a lot of the desires that James L. Brooks and Alan Burns had for the character and for the show weren't exactly met, especially not at first. But, they were willing to do some compromise to legitimately do things that hadn't been really done on TV yet in terms of making characters more realistic. Because that's a thing I think I even forget about TV is there were just kind of unwritten rules even about, like, half of human life couldn't be revealed on television.
Yeah.
Like the everyday things we do, how we act, things like that.
Well, I think Father Knows Best, Spencer, on those episodes, you mentioned how like you couldn't see a man and a woman in bed at night.
That was not that long ago that they were able to even do that in television history.
Crazy.
Yeah. To think about, like, that's certainly within our parents' lifetimes.
Yeah.
No wonder people who are our parents' age suck.
I should note there were other shows kind of in this vein before it, most notably That Girl, but it was considered by all involved with the Mary Tyler Moore Show especially to be kind of the training wheels version. The character in That Girl, whose name I don't remember, because I only watched a couple episodes of that and didn't think it was funny.
Was there an important actor in that?
That Girl.
Oh.
I don't think so. I don't think she's too known. My mom would know, but she was very dependent on her boyfriend in the show, and I think was more of a traditional person. She just wasn't married, was essentially, at the time, the hook. So eventually, the necessary thing happened where Mary Tyler Moore and Grant Tinker got in touch with James L. Brooks and Alan Burns, who had written some scripts for this project. Everybody liked each other. Everybody said, hey, I think we've got something here. And because Mary Tyler Moore was a known name, she basically did get a 13-episode guarantee from CBS. Like, we're going to be able to do this even if your show sucks because you're famous.
That's kind of like how The Critic, we've talked about that show a bunch of times. That was, I believe, James L. Brooks.
It was.
Who had a sweetheart deal with Fox, who said, just whatever your ideas, we'll put it on the air for at least so many episodes. That's how The Critic came to be.
After the Mary Tyler Moore Show, he got 1 million of those, and a lot of them really did work. And, you know, that's, I think, why he got involved with the Tracy Ullman Show and then eventually The Simpsons, too, is he got kind of put places also, like, hey, can you make this work?
Right. Okay. And The Critic, we've discussed it before, has some excellent things to it. It's dated and it has some shitty jokes, but if you can tolerate and get past that, some of the humor in that show is hilarious. I watched a couple episodes recently because it's still so fucking funny.
I'd like to revisit it despite, you know, your concerns you mentioned, because I do remember some of the jokes.
It's gay
and they're
jokes
really funny.
and-
Not those jokes.
Oh, right.
I remember some of the good jokes.
Yeah.
I remember some of those horrible jokes. They rule.
Well, the Duke, the boss, who's an excellent character, is constantly like, what are you, gay, Jay? And I'm not gay. And it's like, this is so 90s obnoxious.
Yeah.
So many shows did that, and it was so stupid.
The kind of gay panic jokes that populated the 90s and the early 2000s especially, just yuck. That was everything. There was that whole Kevin James movie about that
Harry
we've talked
and
about.
Steve.
Yeah, with Adam
yeah.
Sandler. Once the Mary Tyler Moore Show did get on the air, it did well, albeit it took a little bit. It was a little touch and go for a while, and there were some consolations. For instance, as you pointed out, Van, Mary could not be divorced. That was a thing the network said, nobody does that on TV, nobody ever has, you can't. But they were able to have her move after a broken engagement, deciding to pursue, working in news instead. So that was kind of the compromise there. They were able to get a lot of things done that the network didn't want. The character of Rhoda is Jewish. The network did not want her to be Jewish at the time.
But the Jews run the media, Brian.
Yeah, at the time, that was they were like, our audiences don't want any Jewish characters, which is so fucked up.
They're too frightening.
Once they'd had a couple of successful battles with the network, Brooks and Burns kind of understood the show's getting more popular. We're going to be able to get a little bit more creative freedom as we go here. And they started filling out the writing staff with more and more women, which is another one of the things the show did that changed everything. It was the first show to have the percentage of women writers that it did. And from then on out, despite a dip in the late 70s and 80s when TV returned to being more conservative, TV kind of did stay that way, more so.
Thanks, Reagan.
But that's why the show did well with women at the time, is that the writing for the women in the show was done by women, by and large. Or at least when not, they were consulting with the other staffers.
I like the idea that, let me get my consultant on the line.
Yeah.
Oh, are they an expert in the material? They're a woman.
They're a real-life woman.
They know what
they're
women
allowed
do.
to talk on the phone now.
So you write the dialogue and then you call the woman consultant. Is this something you could say? Like, is it possible you would say this?
Once the show got kind of rolling and the creativity surrounding it got more in place, it did very, very well and was, it was a real darling amongst comedy writers at the time. You can see, and I'll be curious to know what you guys think about this, you can see a lot of Simpsons-style jokes in the smaller jokes made in the dialogue and things like that. That wasn't done a whole lot then either, just kind of more irreverent little off jokes.
Well, honestly, the character of Ted seems like a Simpsons
we'll talk
character.
about him, but yeah, that is a Simpsons character. It is also absolutely the template for Ron Burgundy.
Yeah, 100%.
Which I believe has been admitted. But the show, from this point forward, did really well, and it stayed pretty critically and fan-revered until it ended, and it went out on its own terms. Everybody involved with the show decided, it's kind of time to do it, with a couple years left, made the decision. They were able to just, go out after 7 years without souring too much. And they'd already lost a lot of the cast along the way, too, and that can really hurt shows. So, they did it their own way. So good for them.
Almost never happens.
Almost never happens. We'll touch on the cast real quick here before we talk about this episode, which is Season 3, Episode 1, The Good Time News from 1972.
Not as much fucking in this episode as I thought there would be based on the title.
Yeah, The Good Time News in the 70s.
Not a single...
The cast is a pretty tight-knit core cast here. We have Mary Richards, that's Mary Tyler Moore. We have Lou Grant, who's her newsroom boss. That's Ed Asner, who's playing a real gruff, typical male chauvinist here, which the actor Ed Asner was.
Was he? I can totally see that. At
the beginning of the show. So he had a really interesting personal turn in that working on this show and working with a lot of women did kind of help him come out of his shell in terms of seeing women as people. And eventually he won an Emmy Award for a script written by one of the women on the show. And after that began his ascent into just being a feminist who also is like a political activist.
Oh, that should really show you that there's hope for any of us.
Yeah, because he was in his 40s. I mean, when he did change his mind.
That's amazing. Good for him. And I still felt like in this episode, there was a part of it where I couldn't stand him. And then like the second half of it, he was framed in a different light.
Yeah.
Like even in this first episode we talked about, it was like, he's not as bad as I thought.
And by now he's a very changing man in real life by season 3 of the show. He's not all the way there, but he's getting there. He was probably the most acclaimed actor of the cast coming into the show. He and a lot of these people had bit parts in things and were also stage actors. Ted Baxter, the anchor man of the show, is played by Ted Knight. He was also a stage actor who they did not intend to have an older guy. They were thinking like younger guy in his 30s that would be this character, a little more conventionally handsome or whatever. But Ted Knight came in, he auditioned and did a great job. So
I think that's also more what anchormen were. It's more like Ted Knight than young handsome
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it makes a lot more sense.
Didn't even blink over the idea that would be who Ted is.
We've got Murray Slaughter, who's one of the news writers in the newsroom. He's played by Gavin MacLeod, who also is prominently on The Love Boat. My mom would know all about that.
Lots of stuff. He's been in tons of things.
Yeah, like hundreds of credits. And he's interesting in that while it's never explicitly stated, he was envisioned by everyone as gay.
Oh, okay.
They weren't allowed to say it. There are no storylines around it, but that was intended for his character. We have Gordie Howard, played by John Amos. He is the affable weatherman. And, of course, we have Rhoda, played by Valerie Harper.
Didn't realize Rhoda was in this show until she showed up, and then I remembered Brian had all his Rhoda facts.
Hell yeah.
So are you excited? This
I've
is your
seen
first
all of
taste
Rhoda, too.
Yeah. Because that was its own show after
She
this.
spins off after this, yeah.
Okay.
And she's Mary's tough friend from the Bronx who tells her, how things really are.
The Bronx, that's what she's supposed to be from?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that accent belies that, but...
We also have Phyllis Lindstrom, played by Cloris Leachman, but she's not in this episode.
Oh, that's too bad.
And she gets a spinoff later, too, but she plays a really anxious neighbor character, very self-centered, and she's great.
What's the spinoff called?
Phyllis.
That's it?
Yeah, that's all they did with all of them.
They got so creative, they're like, what's their name? Bingo. Not even the full one, just the first name.
By the way, so all the spinoffs, Rhoda got one, Phyllis got one, Ed Asner got one after Mary Tyler Moore ended, called Lou Grant, which was an hour-long drama. Apparently, it was doing well, and then Ed Asner got on some of his lefty political stuff, and the show got canned.
Huh.
So, yeah, he was willing to risk his career just a few years later after being a total asshole in 1970. pretty cool that he made that transition. Before we talk about the episode proper, one more thing. I'd like to thank the author, Jennifer Keeshan Armstrong, for writing the book entitled Mary Lou, Rhoda, and Ted about the Mary Tyler Moore Show's history. It was great. She also wrote Seinfeldia that I read before. Well, I read it years ago, but I kind of, shuffled back through it before we talked about Seinfeld.
What's funny is I remember you mentioning that book on Seinfeld.
You had to look up the author's name.
Yeah, because you didn't remember it. And you were like, I hate that I didn't remember it. Well, here we are, remembering it 2 years later.
That's why I remembered it. And I was like, last time Van had to look this up because I'm a moron who doesn't credit these wonderful people who do all this research. All I do is parse it. Actually, what I mainly do is read it for fun. The Good Time News starts how all Mary Tyler Moore episodes start, which is with the intro song that started this Boob Tube Boys episode.
Who can turn the worm on?
Who can turn the worm on with her smile?
With her smile. The worm. The worm needs to be turned
Is this another
rock hard.
another misspeak of a worm?
Yeah.
Like
2
I did
weeks in a row.
overwormed.
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah.
We got worms on the brain, guys.
All you need to do now is mention David Borealis, and you're repeating everything I did wrong.
I was not aware, if we're being honest, that worms had such a prominent place in American television in the 1970s.
Well, now we learned.
Now we
Holmes and
wormed.
Yo-Yo and worms.
Another thing I got to say right off the bat about the presentation of the theme song, I'm a big fan of the 70s lettering, multicolor lettering that pops up
it's
on the
cool.
screen.
It looks awesome now.
The faded coloring
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah, and we see Mary kind of wandering around in the street, driving, doing shit.
That's it, but not doing anything explicitly, just wandering.
Well, she's like, whoa, how did I get to Minneapolis? This is awesome.
The big city.
The big city. And it's big, but
It
it's
is
like,
big.
it's not that big.
Is that where it's supposed to take
Yeah.
place? Okay.
I, for some reason, had that in my head, but it is kind of strange. Do you know why they picked Minneapolis? Or is there any reason?
They initially were shooting for New York.
That's what you got the vibe of New York in the show.
And I think they kind of, once they decided they wanted the news network to suck, like them to be bad at their jobs and stuff like that,
They figured it'd have to be Minneapolis.
they thought it would be funnier for them to be like, and this is a very Simpsons joke too, to be like, they're constantly one of the lower rated news networks in like a mildly big city, not one of the biggest ones. So
Makes sense.
I heard that the reason they did Minneapolis is at first it was going to be the Mary Tyler Moore's show. They were going to have 2 of them, Twin Cities.
holy shit.
But then the second actress, aka Mary Tyler Moore 2, couldn't do it.
You know the name of the second actress? St. Paula. Isn't that the...
Yeah, that's pretty
Okay,
good.
Yep.
I will say her apartment has a pretty awesome view.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know
Huge,
that I
too.
associate
Floor
like,
length windows.
Minneapolis as having an incredible view, so that's interesting.
No, but like she's got a good job.
Yeah,
She's a working woman.
I guess you can get an apartment with a good view in any city. Well, that's just not what you think of with some cities. Like,
Yeah.
man, I live in Chattanooga. You should see the view I have.
Oh, I can see half of Tennessee. The most beautiful. I guess they have some mountains.
I'm
Tennessee's
sure.
pretty, at least. Like Kansas is a
Yeah.
flat nothing.
There's nothing
They
going
probably
on
got
there.
some nice farms.
No, I don't even think that. I think the farms suck in Kansas.
all that goes on. It's like, look, farm, BTK killer, farm.
I would
farm.
argue that it's possible Oklahoma's even uglier.
The terrain, though, has the same problem as Kansas
Yes.
and Oklahoma, and I think that's the big factor in the ugliness. Missouri does have some forestry and some mountain stuff, so there is
Hills.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that, we have that in our favor. So the theme song ends as in the iconic Mary throwing her knitted beret up into the air in jubilation. We've all seen it before. It's been parodied on everything
And-
also.
There's a lady in the background looking at her, and they stopped it. They freeze framed it at just the right moment.
You have to freeze frame in the 1970s as a rule.
That's true. And this lady in the back is like stink eyeing Mary Tyler
I
Moore.
would. I'd be like, get your beret back on your head.
Quit
It's
tossing
cold.
that shit.
We're in Minneapolis. It's cold. You need that hat.
You get a real sense that woman back there is not going to make it after all. I'll add on the topic of Minneapolis, the show uses that setting a lot. Like there'll be a lot of winter-related problems and things like that. It
Well, that's
doesn't.
cool.
It
I like
doesn't
that.
go without mention.
Of course, the parody that I know you guys have seen, and the only one I can think of off the top of my head that I always laugh at is Homer throwing the bowling ball in the
Yeah.
air, and it doesn't freeze frame, so it just breaks the lane.
Yeah, it's pretty
That's great.
Quick note on the theme song also. In the first season, the opening line is, "How will you make it on your own?" And that changes to, "Who can turn the world on with her smile?" Because she figures out how to make it on your own. You don't have to ask her that anymore. And then the final line goes from, "You just might make it after all," to, "You're gonna make it after all."
They went to a self-help seminar. They saw that the power of positivity Maybe they went to a power team seminar and that taught them to be upbeat.
They became dream makers. I don't know if the music, and this was covered in the book that I read, but I don't remember if the musician initiated these changes, because I feel like that might actually be the case, or if the showrunners contacted him about it. This is funny too. We before we were recording, we were talking about Live and Let Die. The people in charge of James Bond, Alfred Broccoli or whatever, did not. He was like, "This song is great, Paul McCartney. Who are we going to get to sing it?" Yeah, he was like, "I want to buy this song and have a more traditional singer sing it." And Paul McCartney was like, "Fuck you."
This is like post-Beatles Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's this old-ass British guy who liked traditional singers like Shirley Bassey and stuff, who's great, but very similar thing with the Mary Tyler Moore singer, apparently, whose name I wish I had, I don't. The creators were like, okay, let's see who we can get to sing it. And he's like, well, I'm not giving you the song unless I'm singing
It's my song.
Oh, couldn't respect those types of people more.
Good for them.
Yeah, good for them.
I'd sell out.
As evidenced by this very commercial podcast that we do.
Well, we haven't got any offers yet.
Let me take a swig of our sponsor here. Seaforce Water, premium artesian water. There's no other. I'm not going to do it. But anyway.
You guys know it's the water that kicks you.
Ouch, my eyes.
Every time you take a sip, Chuck Norris is nodding approval somewhere.
With narrowed eyes. This episode starts out in Mary's apartment, her first one. She'll have a new one in our next episode. We already talked about how cool it looks. Did you guys notice the gigantic M on the wall?
I did. Like, that's your decor is your first initial.
Yeah, that's why I've got a big B everywhere. This started a trend. Also, people started buying the letter of the
I
first
see
name.
those, like even now.
I
it's
believe
still a thing.
This was the thing that initiated all of that. And if you go into a Ross or whatever now, you'll see those.
Well, I mean, I've got the big E over here. I mean, V over here.
You also have them for your cats. Also,
B, V. Oh, Brian Vaughn.
My initials. I always thought it was for me.
No, it's for
even
cats.
though I started this premise by saying it was for your cats. Really falling apart here under scrutiny, aren't I?
This is like when you couldn't remember your grandpa's name. Sorry, great-grandfather. Who
Walton
joined us.
Vaughn? What do you mean I couldn't remember his name?
Patreon.com/Bootu Inc. It's all free. Hear bonus episodes.
This episode starts with Mary drinking disgusting cold coffee because she forgot to plug in her coffee maker or
Coffee
whatever
breaker.
that is.
70s coffee thing.
I don't
she
see how it
has.
makes the coffee. It looks like you just pour coffee in it and it keeps it warm.
Maybe that is what it is.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with 70s coffee making technology, but that thing looks really one-dimensional to me.
It does. And, Mary's a little frustrated with it and makes some audible noises of disgust upon drinking that coffee.
It takes like a minute. Her face really has to convey how gross this coffee is for a while.
Mary Tyler Moore, very much in a Jerry Seinfeld way, is getting by as an actor more on a certain likability than on acting chops, so to speak, which is why she was surrounded by a bunch of stage actors, much as Jerry was.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In Seinfeld. But she's really good at the facial expression end of it and kind of the nuanced parts. Not as
the
good.
Second episode. She's
Yeah,
so good at
it's
it.
masterful.
Well, let me say this here. I'm going to explain how my journey of watching this show for this show went. Again, I hadn't seen any Mary Tyler Moore. I just knew of it. So I sat down and I watched this episode first. And I'll just tell you flat out, fucking hated it. I was angry. I thought it sucked. I could not understand how this became a popular show. And I'll explain more about that at the end. Then I watched the second episode we're going to cover next week. Genuinely laughed my ass off. So I thought, okay, first episode just wasn't that good. Watched it a second time to do my notes. I liked it a lot more. And I think if you know the characters and you understand their beats, even this episode is a pretty good one. But without knowing any of that, the first thing I thought was that Mary was shrill. I didn't like her voice, and I think, this is
I'm sensitive about these sorts of remarks.
fair enough. And that bothered me. And then the narrative of the Fox News stuff, which we'll get into later, that bothered me. So I hated this episode the first time I saw it, but I have completely come around.
I can see how you'd like the next one since it's all about inappropriate humor. I can totally see why you like that.
Yeah, I, of course, liked them both immediately. I've seen them both, though. But I will say multiple watches, I think, did help me on this one a lot, too. mainly because I began to appreciate Ted's performance.
Bingo.
More
Because I
and more.
didn't know what Ted was.
Which is
at the
just
time.
amazing.
I agree. I like this episode right away, but I didn't like Ted until the next episode.
Once
I
you
didn't
know
get
what
it.
his character is, and by the way, by the end of the series run, he's much more sympathetic. Also, they did a good job of kind of slowly unfurling the characters, which, as you said, Van, once you know the characters, that's where the humor comes from. And I think that more than anything is the through line from something like this to something like The Simpsons, where you have a plethora of side characters that are funny, not just because of the lines, but because you know what that character's deal is.
Right, because this show is also full of quirky characters.
Yes.
Each character is, except for Mary, who's the straight man in this.
Who was always
Straight
in
woman.
that role. Yeah. Much, again, like Jerry Seinfeld in the show called Jerry.
But just like that, she also does some goofy stuff from time to time, and it works.
Yeah, it does. Just like this weird coffee face she makes before Rhoda barges in to tell her all about her date from the last night. Now, Rhoda is not a fan of this date, but let me just say it out loud to you guys in a list like she does. Miniature golf, arcade, Yugoslavian restaurant. I think that sounds pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Unfortunately, the main attraction for this restaurant was guess what the goat's stuffed with, and Rhoda was able to do that.
What do you think it was?
People.
So even goat is made of people.
It's the only reason I can think she doesn't like this guy. I like this quick little joke here where she's explaining the guy to Mary, and Rhoda says that he's a stewardess, and Mary corrects her to say steward, and Rhoda says, well, I'm not sexist, which to me suggests that Rhoda believes the appropriate standard term is stewardess, which is a pretty funny joke because Rhoda never gives a shit, which is kind of her thing. You know, she's never wrong and she never gives a shit.
That should have been the title of her spinoff, is Rhoda Doesn't Give a Shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, my first time through this, I assume and was told that this show is groundbreaking and a woman in the workforce and all that. But then immediately we get the emasculation of a man because he doesn't have a man job. With this joke, he's a stewardess. Ugh, that's to be looked down upon. And I didn't like that. I really
I thought maybe
didn't
that
like
was like a self-aware sort of double standard sort of aspect.
Oh, okay.
of it.
With Rhoda, I believe that too. But again, this is only because, and you guys didn't see Rhoda in the second episode. She was busy being on Rhoda by then. But that's very of her character. Her character is very one of those, of course, she's resilient and tough, but she's also pretty guarded and has a lot of double standards.
Rhoda's dressed like a gypsy hot dog.
Yeah. Yeah. And Rhoda, by the way, was also a big fashion icon at the time. A lot of scarf wearing started happening after
Gypsy
this.
hot dog costume. It's seriously, it's mustard yellow, ketchup red, and then like I want to say a do-rag, but that's not right.
I don't know
Well,
what it is.
So anyway.
It's a different scene. She comes in wearing exactly what you're describing.
Oh, got ahead of myself.
And
Okay.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it. When we get to that, she comes in straight up Hulk Hogan.
Okay, yes, you're right.
It's all red and yellow.
That's better than the
Yeah.
hot dog thing. You're
with
right.
the bandana.
Rhodomania.
So Rhoda asks Mary what exactly she's doing with her gross coffee and her papers on the table, and she's going over her notes for a meeting she has later on the day with station executives with Mr. Grant. And Mary's nervous about it because she's always introduced as the woman executive, and there's kind of like both a tokenism and an extra pressure because of that. I do like that duality is explored a little bit.
I also like this first scene that I watched of the show here. Immediately you get a little insight into her character. I don't know anything about Mary Tyler Moore, but her papers all over the table was like a nice little prop and a viewpoint into her mind. Like she's clearly very intelligent. She's smart. She's not maybe that good at organization, but she's got a lot of ideas, is how that mess of papers on her table seems to me. Like it speaks to her work ethic.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And I mean, she does, to your point also, it's just a sloppy mess of papers. She's always presented as kind of a combination of very put together and falling apart.
A little Leslie Knope.
Which there's no way that
had to
Leslie
be,
Knope
yeah.
wasn't that wasn't a thought, was the
inspiration.
comparison
It's
to Mary Richards.
funny though, because they definitely try to convey a little bit of that. Potentially a disaster is about to strike, but she seems very competent. So all that is just there with the papers to me. I got that sense from her.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really nice detail. And I think when she goes into why she's kind of worried about it too, it has nothing to do with her ideas and her performance, which I think is very telling. None of her real concerns here are about how well she'll do.
Right.
She knows she will.
And everyone tells her how good she is at her job. That comes out right away. So yeah, it's all just the awkward thing with her being in her position at that time period.
Once we get to WJM and get our first look at the news station, we're going to see a bunch of international clocks. We're going to see a lot of wood paneling. We know it's the 70s. Just look at this room. Look how everyone looks. Did you guys notice any of the kind of newsroom extras in these episodes?
I
As an
didn't.
example.
There's a couple of guys who pop up here and there. I don't know who they are. They're not really characters, who have just 80 grade feathered hair.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and I mean, bell bottoms, just amazing.
I didn't notice any specifics, but what did please me as soon as we got into the newsroom setting, which is the majority of the show, is I felt like I was watching some kind of chaotic mishmash of two shows that I really enjoyed quite a bit over the course of my life, which is Mad Men and The Newsroom. It felt like they just shoved them together in a nonsensical fashion.
Is Newsroom the Dumb and Dumber guy one?
Yes,
Okay.
with Jeff Daniels.
Jim
Jeff
Carrey.
Daniels.
Yeah.
Jeff Daniels is great, too. I can't believe I couldn't remember his name. He's a great actor, but not Jim Carrey.
Honestly, the show does have a lot of that combination feel because it's focused mainly on Newsroom or Mary's apartment.
Mm.
You know, Mary's personal life, Mary's work life. Sometimes those bleed together.
Lou's office is like a hastily constructed add-on. It doesn't fit with the Newsroom. Like typically it's right-angled walls and everything.
Yeah.
And this thing's just kind of added there and it's fine.
And he
but-
needs a better nameplate on his door. It just is like blue letters, Lou Grant. Is that his name, Lou Grant?
Yeah.
Well, nameplates have come a long way. They're a lot snazzier now.
perhaps a placard.
Something.
I think
It looks awful.
That's one of our greatest advances is in nameplates. What's actually going on in WJM is everybody's kind of nervous about this big executive meeting later. Ted, the anchor man, walks in and he talks with Mary and Murray, the staff writer, about the big meeting that they do have later coming up. And Ted's concern is mainly just that he doesn't want to overdress so as to seem insecure. So he's currently looking super casual. By the end of the conversation, though, he backs out of that idea and decides he needs to go dress up for the meeting anyway and kind of walks away with his shoulders slumped. Gordy, the weatherman, walks in right as Ted leaves, one of those scenarios that always happen on TV.
Pop in and out.
And Mary asks him and Murray, hey, guys, am I doing a better job as associate producer than the last guy, the guy I've replaced? Emphatically, they both say yes. You're awesome. That guy was terrible. Why are you asking us this? And Mary reveals that in her research for the meeting, going over the budget, she found out that guy made $50 a week more than her.
Woo, that's a lot of money.
Did either of you do it?
Nope.
No.
I'm just going to assume
Good,
1,000.
good. I'm so glad you did.
1,000? I was going to say
$1 million.
$50 in 1973. So your guess is $1 million.
Mhm.
Brian, what's your guess?
So my guess is going to be like 200.
Undershot it, way overshot it, Spencer. Sorry. Weren't quite there with $1 million. $50 is worth $336.90
A week?
today.
That's great.
That's a ton of money.
Yeah.
I love how they just go right after the wage gap immediately in this
Right away.
episode. They don't
Mhm.
take any time.
No, none at all. And this felt almost more aggressive than a show now would be. Like in a lot of ways, like
What
a
do you mean?
network
They've got
comedy.
that fixed now, so they don't have to put that in a show anymore.
You know what they have on the news that we also have here at Boob Tube Boys?
Anchors.
No, I don't have an anchor. I don't have a fucking boat. I'm talking about breaks. Let's take a break. Mary is, of course, enraged by this, as we all would be if we found out we made like $1,300 a month less than the guy who had our job before us. This is another instance where Mary proves that while she is sometimes seems fragile, she immediately goes right into Lou's office to ask about this pay gap. We get our first look at Ed Asner this episode in his wood-paneled gross office that Van mentioned earlier. I want you guys to guess how old Ed Asner was in this scene.
I felt like he was about to have a heart attack old. That's what I thought when I looked at him. Can't believe that guy lived a long time after this and was a political activist because he looks like he's about to have a heart attack.
Mhm. This is going to be one of those scenarios where we did this. I don't remember what show where we said, oh, he looks like he's 50, but then it turns out he's like 22. Jason Alexander may have been the one for Seinfeld, but I would guess because he did live as long as he did, something absurd like 35.
See, I would
Oh, wow.
I would say 50.
he
looked
was
about-
42, which I
Okay.
thought there's...
He was
that-
42.
That's still younger
Yeah.
than I would have guessed. but-
I would have thought, honestly, going into this, if I didn't know about his career afterwards and I was just looking at him, I'd say probably 55.
I would have thought, early 50s. But yes, he looked to me clearly over 50. Not by much, but he wasn't 40-something in my head. I said this in the Waltons. I felt like everyone looked like shit in that show. Like
Yeah.
how Ralph Waite was bright
You're
red.
right. I think the filming like how people were filmed in the 70s wasn't very flattering for anyone.
They've done a lot better with that in recent years to where everyone all looks 30 all the time.
But it's also that they let people who weren't 20-year-old supermodels on shows. Like
Yeah.
even for the ugly boss, Ed Asner, I don't think he could get that job anymore. I mean, if he looked like he did in today's era.
Let me go ahead and say this right now. So one of the cool things about the Mary Tyler Moore Show also is she doesn't settle down ever. Like she never gets married.
Good.
She never dates anyone for very long or anything like that. And she never gets involved with a coworker. They do not go that route. Like every show does, especially that goes 7 years. But there is one instance in the last season where the showrunners were interested in having her and Lou get together.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
So they do it. They don't do it, but they have them
They
on
fuck.
screen.
Yeah, another real controversial thing. You can see
Penetration.
No, but they have them go out on a date in the last season and decide, oh, this doesn't work at all.
Well, I'm glad they didn't actually do it
Yeah.
then.
They did.
But
There was an actual date between Ed Asner
Yeah.
and Mary Tyler Moore at some point. It was one date, clearly didn't work. Ed Asner jokes about it. I didn't read how it came to be, but it wasn't
So-
real, but it was.
the funny thing about this is James L. Brooks, when asked about it, like, oh, you have this progressive show and you did this typical thing, and he was like, we honestly thought it wasn't very typical to do because it's not like handsome older guy.
Yeah.
Right.
But it is like we thought this. These are his exact words, I believe. We thought Ed was sexy in a unique way.
Okay.
You know,
what?
fine,
Sure.
whatever. He's a little powder keg of a guy.
I mean, his personality could be, you might be like, oh, he's just so authoritative or something. I don't know.
Look how he's changed for good after all these
That's
years.
very attractive. I don't know how well I can elucidate this. I don't know if I can really say it right, but I think it's okay to have the occasional stereotypical thing happen in a show that's trying to be groundbreaking because typical things happen even
Yes.
to unusual people, even to people who are trendsetters or whatever also do normal, boring things every now and then. So I think it's okay to throw a little of that in there, even if you're like, that would happen in any show. You should have some of those moments. It's not like
Yeah.
only interesting things happen.
It grounds the show a bit.
Sure.
So I agree with that.
You do have to have a degree of that, or else you fly off the rails if you're, based in reality, and you're not believable any longer. Mary tries not to get upset about this whole salary gap thing, but Lou can tell that she's getting upset and tries to switch the subject to the meeting right away, essentially just interrupting her, talking about their meager successes and how they can kind of trick everyone into thinking they're more successful at the station. But again, Mary cuts him off and says, look, I'm upset and you're ignoring it, and I don't like that. And Ed Asner says, look, I just thought it was a woman thing.
Yeah, so he's not off to a good start.
No.
Well, and I have two thoughts about this. You said that he tries to change the subject. I don't think he did earlier. I think he genuinely it just glanced off him that she was upset because she didn't come out and say,
And
I'm
that
upset.
could very well be too.
And then two, I hinted at this earlier. She comes in and basically nags him here, and I did not like that. I think if you're trying to make this be a strong, powerful woman, she should have marched her ass in there and said, Lou, you paid the last guy $50 more a week than me. I think I deserve that. But she didn't. She beat around the bush, and she was just kind of like, and I didn't like that one.
Well, she acted immediately out of emotion instead of
Yes.
giving it some time to think
Right.
about it. So I look at that too as like maybe anyone would do it the wrong way if you go
Sure.
right into the office and say, you got to think that through before you have that conversation.
I thought this was very realistic to her very anxious character.
Yeah.
And again,
anyone.
second time through,
Yeah.
it didn't bother me to the
Right,
degree it did
right.
the first time.
This is really fascinating to hear your perspective on this because it kind of reaffirms what the writers were saying about the show, which is it's better if you know the characters.
Yeah, 100%.
Everything centers on the characters. I think all of us prefer character-based work over, plot-based work when
Yeah,
it comes. Like you have to like the characters have to be something you want to look at and listen to.
That's the ultimate way to categorize a TV show too, right? It's like, is
Yeah.
this a plot-based show or is it a character-based show?
Is this NCIS? That's another way.
Oh, so it's plot-based, character-based, NCIS.
Yeah.
Those are the three types of shows.
What does that stand for?
National College of Institution Science.
Of
Boy,
institution
you
science.
very briefly were going at such a pace that I thought you were for real.
Fell right off that cliff at the end there.
The National College of Institution.
No hesitance.
We're very pro institution. We are one.
Here at the National College.
Would you like to donate a wing? Mary does get her shit together here and starts arguing for equal pay, saying there's just no reason two people doing the exact same job should be paid differently. And what transpires next, and that's an argument that people have trouble understanding today. What transpires next is what viewers of the show, progressive viewers at the show, did not like, and I think is way more realistic and correct. So after Mary argues, Lou gives her a bullshit rebuttal saying men have a family to feed. That's why they make more. You can come back when you have an answer to that. And Mary does not immediately off the top of her head have that. She dejectedly and frustratedly leaves, and 2 seconds later, when Lou's looking super smug about himself, she busts right back in and says, that doesn't make any sense. You'd have to pay a guy with 3 kids more than a guy with 2 kids, more than a guy with 1, etc. It just, where does that end? This isn't about that. What's it really about? And it's about that she's a woman.
Yeah.
So people didn't like that she didn't come up with it immediately.
Yeah.
From your point earlier,
Again, yeah, that's
she's
realistic,
angry.
yeah.
It took her a second. I get it. Like I feel like I'm not a stupid guy, but I, improv's
I would need
hard.
the rest of the day to get a good answer.
These are the sorts of like socio-political arguments people weren't readily prepared to have in 1972,
Sure.
like they are now also, necessarily.
And like a woman at that time, even if they were being forthright and strong in the sense, they would still have to bite their tongue more often.
Oh,
than
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Everyone in her life would advise her just to be grateful that she had the job she did and not bring that up.
That's a really good point. Yeah, just keep your mouth shut. Somehow you got this far.
I think it's funny too, and so it's such a good insight into her character that she does just go directly in the office. That's not even probably a good idea. You should probably think it out, like I was saying earlier. Decide exactly how you want to say it, what you want to say it. She didn't even do that. Just goes right in there instantly.
I think a lot of the relationship between, to talk about Parks and Recreation again, between Leslie Knope and Ron Swanson is modeled off this one.
Yeah, and it works quite well, yeah.
In that you absolutely know that Lou really cares about Mary, but just can't reveal it.
I actually didn't necessarily get that yet in this episode. It was when I did that I was telling you I felt like I viewed Ed Hasner a little differently.
Yeah.
At this point in the episode, I just thought he was
You
awful.
wouldn't know. And to Van's point, unless you were familiar with his character in full, you would be like, this is just a reprehensible human being.
And who would know that in a mere 30 years, he'd put all those balloons on his house and just fly away.
And look kind of similar as a cartoon.
Yeah, a little bit. They just gave him more hair, really.
Yeah.
That is surprisingly accurate, actually. I didn't think about it until you said that, but that kind of is him.
And he has a talking dog in Mary Tyler Moore, too. I think that happened in that movie.
Yeah, Mary Tyler Moore's in there.
Oh, okay. That's the name of the dog in Up.
Yeah.
Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah, the dog's name is Doug, I think.
That sounds about right.
I think it was. I love Doug. Sweet dog.
I'm going to cut that out and put it in the King of Queens episode.
I love Doug.
Slather it in there.
You find another one where he says Heffernan, so it'll be like, I love Doug. Heffernan!
Yeah.
We do our own little, the shitty, sleazy tabloid channels that make up their own things. We do our version of
our
that.
own slicing and dicing, but to perjure ourselves? Interesting bad idea we've had. At this point, Mary's interrupted once more because Ted comes into Lou's office to discuss his wardrobe for the meeting they're having, and Lou basically begs him to stay to avoid dealing with Mary's very logical conclusion that she should be paid more, and goes so far as to leave the office to help Ted change. This is funnier if you know the characters too, because Lou doesn't like Ted and would immediately be like, I don't give a shit what you wear.
That's a great point. Yeah.
But because he wants to not deal with the whole Mary thing and just blow it off, he's like, of course, this is important.
Do you guys have any thoughts that's going to come up later on Ted's wardrobe decisions? I'm not sure how much we're getting into that, because I would like to say that I approve of his casual with professional look. That's more of a thing that is done now, and it kind of cool that he was doing that then.
People wouldn't be looking at his feet on the news anyway.
When they get to the meeting, which we're going to right now, Ted looks cool as fuck.
Yeah,
really
the
does.
white sneakers with the suit is awesome.
And
Like
then he puts on
pinstripe.
those big old glasses. at the end. I was like, man, Ted, you belong in 2018.
Yeah, he's like a star now.
The station manager meeting is hosted by a young executive named Jack, who has fluffy 70s sideburns.
And the most vacant, wall-eyed look.
Yeah.
I think it's perfect for the character.
It's great. I totally got like executive that doesn't understand anything vibe
Really
from him.
condescending, not really listening to anyone.
Also,
And I don't know if the actor is that or not. I haven't seen him in anything else, but nailed it.
Yeah.
Lou in this scene needs a tie stretcher. His tie's too short.
Yeah. Which, how do you get a tie that's too short for Ed Asner?
That's a good point.
What is he, like 5'4", 250? It seems
I think
like
he
when
is
you look at it.
5'4".
I don't think you can get away with a short tie if you're as short as he is.
Yeah.
I think if you're taller and you have a shorter tie, people just will gloss over it more.
Yeah, like you could do a shorter tie.
Did you guys question at all
close enough.
the existence of an object that stretches ties out called a tie stretcher?
You know what I didn't, now that you mention
No
it?
one said anything.
We were all like, yeah,
I glazed
he does
right
need
over
He
that.
does need a tie stretcher. You're
I've got
right.
one in there.
Yeah. What an idiot. Not bring his tie stretcher to work for this meeting. It's a big, important meeting, and the guy doesn't have a tie stretcher?
Surely in his car it came standard.
I was bothered
It's in
by
the cigarette lighter.
the entire scene. That was what I was too bothered by to watch anything else. It's like his tie is not the right length.
Jack really wants to not so much go over what happened the last year like Lou was thinking. And Lou does want this meeting to hurry up and get over with. He says, I have things to do. He doesn't like events like this. But Jack's real agenda is he wants the news to be more informal, to appeal to a wider, broader audience like some of the other local news stations are doing, like stupid Channel 6. The news is supposed to entertain now, Jack says. And Lou disagrees. He says, this is stupid, this is rotten. Ted, he, for his part, feigns choking to death. And Mary's been pretty quiet, and Lou says, don't even ask her, she's just going to agree with me. But she doesn't. She says, no, I think it might be interesting to pursue a little more informal news format. Lou says, nah, news is news, and then makes his central argument.
News is truth, Jack. And I'm not going to make it into something fake. Why not?
That is the question of our nation that happened at one point, and the why not was what we collectively responded with.
It's weird that he didn't have his Australian accent here, Rupert Murdoch.
This felt like, again, and I know all this was going on to a degree back then, but it felt kind of like, man, you guys don't know how right this is.
Yeah, this is such a prescient concept, and it only gets worse through the episode.
Jack kind of shoehorns Mary, who very tentatively liked the idea, as his ally and says, okay, well, things are going to change now. We're going to go to this new fun format. And just as a formality, he wants to get Ted's okay, but when Jack asks Ted kind of has a faraway look and then says, I'm wearing tennis shoes because I'm gonna be running around later. I've got errands to do. And the look on Ted Knight's face here is so good when he's startled back into the conversation. It's clear he spent the entire time coming up with a non-excuse for wearing tennis shoes.
I didn't know what to think of Ted the first time through. Here, I was
It's
still
really
kinda
hard.
like, what?
It's so hard to get a read on him in
Yeah.
this episode.
Now that I know, though, I think this is hilarious. I think it's great.
Ted's really a real diamond in the rough.
It's a great character.
Yeah. I mean, as he's been this influential for a reason. Next, we go to a bar where Lou likes to just drink scotch after scotch and forget his problems.
During the day, at work
Of
hours?
course.
Yep.
Yeah, like he was drinking in most of this episode, I
most
think.
most
Okay,
all
yeah.
episodes, yeah. Mary goes to find him. She knows he's going to be there because he's not at work, and that's kind of the problem. She says the news has been on for 15 minutes, and usually you kind of care about how your show goes. But Mr. Grant really doesn't tonight. He's very discouraged about how the meeting went. He does say, hey, bartender, turn the TV on for me. So the bartender turns the TV on, and this will come into play a bit more later. Mary says, look, Lou, I'm not upset at you anymore. She wouldn't call him Lou. She
What does
says,
she call him?
Mr. Grant, yeah.
Okay. Hey, Lou. You can't
Hey,
say
sweet Lou.
unless you have that accent.
She says, Mr. Grant, look, I'm not upset at you anymore. I've had time to think. Hopefully we're both on good terms here. Because they were both pretty upset at each other throughout the course of the day. And then Lou says, well, I'm still upset because I have a reason to be. Again, showing he's just totally clueless. We cut to Ted on the TV screen of the bar, who shuffles through a bunch of papers and admits he lost his place. And then Mary, of course, gets a coy look and asks Lou, like, so you want to keep this way? Which is, pretty fun little moment. Felt realistic.
Do you think that is what a news program looked like in the 1970s? Because I don't know.
I don't either.
Was it a guy standing in front of a camera in a small studio reading off papers?
Probably.
It makes
so,
sense that
yeah.
it would be, but that's crazy to me to think about because anchors now are you're either got Bill O'Reilly being an asshole or you've got smiling, perfect white teeth guy who never makes a mistake and just blankly looks at the camera as pretty hair. Like
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. We're going to have to ask some older people about this or go back in time.
Happens from time to
Like
time.
the
And get
Ninja
your
Turtles.
grandpa on it, your great-grandfather. When you were looking for a time travel
Mm-hmm.
pop culture reference, you went Ninja Turtles?
Turtles in Time.
Yeah, I see it, but like Back to the Future or any other, the Doctor Who or whatever.
No, you're right. I made a very loose but successful pop culture
I
reference.
mean, it fit.
It wasn't one of the better ones I could have made.
I just want to call it out.
I could have said Looper. You know, I could have said that Shane Carruth movie that was made for like $5,000 that I don't remember the name of that was pretty good.
You could have gone with Walker, Texas Ranger.
I don't know that there's time travel, but I'm sure
Well,
there
you
is.
can't question it.
No, because I think they dipped their toes into every pond they could find.
Hayes Cooper. Look it up. I've been watching a lot of Walker, Texas Ranger lately.
I commend you. I'm sure your brain's doing well.
My head hurts more now. My vocabulary's
Is it
disappeared.
because the sponsor, the Chuck Norris sponsor, where you just, I'm going to drink some Chuck Norris water and watch this and drink this?
It's
And-
No,
the
that's right.
full
This is my life
Walker
now.
experience.
You also have to punch and kick while watching it.
of course.
It's good. It's good exercise.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's a good workout. And, you know, it's always good to drink more water, even if it has kicks in it.
Working it to the bone.
That makes it sound like the cereal, like it's all soggy
Kicks.
kick cereal in the water.
Was that any good?
No,
I don't think
if
so.
you put, it's like a lot of cereals that I had as a kid. If you put sugar in it, it's fine.
Right, but
Yeah.
otherwise.
No.
Because it was just like Cocoa Puffs without flavor, right?
Yes.
It was just the orb.
But it was really good if you just put a ton of sugar in it.
That's the thing about those cereals that don't have sugar. You have to add so much that it's like,
Oh, it was worse.
let's just get the kind that has it.
I also don't want to do that because the sugar you add is going to be grainy.
Yeah.
And it's going to change the texture.
My
Don't care for
favorite
that.
part of that, of finishing the bowl of cereal, is to drink the sugar milk afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
That was
When
One
I was
time-
a kid, I was very into that.
one time I got so excited about it that I just poured a bowl of milk and put sugar in it and just drank it.
But it wasn't the same.
It's not the same. You need the actual cereal sugar first, and then adding the sugar to it. You can't just do milk. You can't just do milk and sugar.
Man, my dad used to sit around with no shirt on and eat butter and sugar sandwiches.
I know the butter sugar sandwiches. You've never added the component of your father without a shirt
Well,
on.
you
to this
probably
story.
assume that.
The reason I like to wear a shirt when I'm eating is that way if I spill it on myself, I can lick it off my shirt. You can't do that if you're shirtless.
You could, but it's a little grosser.
Mary Tyler Moore.
There's Cheetos in my chest hair.
That does happen.
A Boob Tube Boys story. Back in the Mary Tyler Moore show bar, Mary's trying to explain to Lou, look, I disagreed with you in the meeting because I disagree. Like, I'm interested in trying out new things on our show. And Lou says, no, you did this only to hurt me. You sold me out for $50 a week. Mary is very offended that Lou would think this about her. And then what follows really, does a good job of kind of summarizing their relationship, at least early on in the show.
I don't sell people out, especially you.
Especially me.
That's right, especially you.
Why especially me?
Because I love you.
Look, we can't have a fight if you say things like that.
But I do care about you.
Mary?
And I know you care about me,
Okay,
too.
okay, the fight's over. You win.
I'm going to have to remember to disarm my boss by telling her that I love her. The next time we disagree about something, just tell her I love her.
And the subtext here is, of course, Lou realizes, I feel the same way. God damn it. I can't actually be mad about this dumb thing.
I like this.
Yeah.
I felt it was heartwarming, and the two
They
actors
really-
had chemistry together.
You
Yeah.
know, that's usually only used in like a romantic sense, but it shouldn't be. There's sometimes you see actors play off each other and it just works really well, and they do have that.
It was great.
Yeah, this is the moment where I was like, oh, okay, this guy's actually supposed to have some redeeming qualities.
Yeah,
He's not
and
just bad.
I was wondering that watching this, thinking about you guys watching it, is at this point, this is one of my thoughts, does this change what you think about Lou?
Mhm.
Kind of not knowing that you guys, what you knew about him as a character.
It totally did, and it doesn't hurt that Ed Asner is fucking great.
Oh.
Like, he does such a good
in
job
this
in the
scene
show.
too, the look on his face too, just
And like the
throughout.
frustration, it's like, yeah, you're right. I'd love that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And right away they're on good terms again. And this is how it always works with Lou, as it does with all, men who've shoved their emotions down deep into their considerable girth.
Their crevice.
Into their many crevices. Now that they are on good terms again, they are, they're going to turn on Channel 6 in the bar and see what they're up to. If they're going to become informal, they need to see what one of the top-rated informal news shows looks like. Once Channel 6 is on, we hear the anchors laughing hysterically about a devastating typhoon and then cutting to some sort of belly dancing story. So, pretty quickly proving Lou right. And another thing I like about this scene, we see Ted fumbling through his notes and not saying anything in the old news format, and then we see these doofuses making light of a typhoon in the new one, proving that obviously there's a lot to be fixed for everyone involved here.
It's great social commentary.
And it's so fitting, too, that the executive is like, things are going pretty well, but I would like to change everything in the form of stealing someone else's success.
Yep, exactly. Piggyback off that, since they're higher up the totem pole than us.
Even though what we're doing is working fine, let's do what someone else is doing that we didn't even think of.
And Mary says to Lou, hey, we don't have to go that far. We can just make our news show a little more entertaining. And Lou very correctly says, I don't think you understand, Mary. If you give them that, they will want you to do anything they ask. That's what the network is going to ask of you. Channel 6 is one of the top-rated programs, and it's because they don't have boundaries on how low they will sink. Turns out Jack gave Lou a letter, which he shows Mary, delegating the responsibility of the format change mostly to Mary since she's receptive to the whole thing. She's not necessarily in favor of this because she knows it's not going to go over that well with everyone else, but she does immediately have a good idea when the subject of Ted comes up, which is to pair him with someone warm and endearing that can kind of offset Ted's, let's say...
Tedness.
Yeah, bumbly aloofness.
Is this where we get the fantastic Bobby Fischer tie-in joke?
Yes. And that's Lou's suggestion. Who could you possibly get to offset Ted in that manner? Bobby Fischer? I don't think he wants to be on TV.
Is that the chess guy?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I got it right.
That's definitely a 70s era joke.
That is such a 70s joke. Or maybe 90s again.
Because they made that movie.
Yeah.
Searching for Bobby Fischer. Did you see that movie?
Nope.
It's a good movie.
What's it about?
I remember
Bobby
thinking
Fischer.
it was
They
good.
find him?
No.
Oh.
You can't
been
find that
lost
guy.
since.
That guy was nuts.
He beat that computer, didn't he? Or did the computer beat him?
I think that was a different guy that played
Oh, that was
computer.
a Kasparov or something?
One of those.
Yeah,
I
and the
know about
computer
chess
beat him to
people.
death.
On the grandest stage of all Russian television.
Mary comes up with the idea of, hey, why don't we just put Gordy with Ted? Gordy's pretty cool.
Gordy's too cool to be a news anchor.
He's great. And Lou agrees. He said they really do offset each other. And what he proceeds to do is pretty funny. He said, one of them's sharp, Gordy. One of them's dull. One of them's black. One of them's gray. Calling Ted gray was just, it's just so perfect. They know Ted's going to be upset about this, though, because he is a ball hog. He wants the spotlight on him all the time. And knowing this does not deter Lou, who actually begins, smiling once he realizes he gets to deliver the bad news to Ted. Back at the news station, we see Ted. He's all up in his powder blues, getting ready to deliver the news. Rhymed on accident there. And he's delivering the news. He's talking about a raging fire. Lou walks up right beside him while he's, actually on TV and starts smiling at Ted. Once they finally hit a commercial break, Lou breaks the news to Ted. He says, look, we're going to have a second anchor. Things are changing up. You were in the meeting, And Ted says, well, you know what? Fine. You can get someone else to replace me right now. And he storms off. Lou is not bothered at all and says, hey, okay. Hey, Gordy, do you want to finish the news? And Gordy says, fine. Not only will I finish it, I'll be awesome at it right away.
And the way Ed Asner scans the room, just looking for a warm body to replace Ted.
Because he knows right away, no one's going to do worse than Ted.
I assume he also realizes that there's no way Ted's actually quitting.
Right.
Like he gets that.
Ted would never quit. And he threatens it a lot, by the way, which is another part of his character, is he's a bit of a prima donna.
Which is different from a post-Madonna.
Mm-hmm. That's once the Madonna style kind of got, developed further and then people sought to transcend it. Upon hearing Gordy do an awesome job, Ted dashes in out of nowhere and takes right back over.
Pushes him out of the way.
And because he has to explain what just happened on air, Ted again has no good excuse and just very flatly says, I went to the bathroom.
After Gordy already said he was vacationing.
In the middle of the show.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Back in Mary's apartment now, Mary's brushing her teeth with the loudest electric toothbrush that's ever been made.
And the
possibly
first,
largest.
the world's first
Yeah.
and largest electric toothbrush.
You know, and to your point on that, it probably would be that loud, given it was the first and I would imagine was difficult to lift.
Yeah, it had to have been like 100 pounds. And it was portable, right? It wasn't plugged in that we could see.
Yeah, it was wireless. Must have had batteries in it.
I don't know if I trust it. It probably was toxic in some way and might have shredded all your teeth or something.
I'm kind of surprised they trusted it at the time and didn't think it would take over.
It had like 8 or 9 D-cell batteries to power it.
It makes all the power go out when you use it.
Do you think there were any conservative viewers at the time who were like, this Mary Tyler Moore show has a single woman going to work and brushing her teeth with the devil's
With
machine?
the robots.
I guarantee they would be like, man, only real Americans use actual physical, what do you call it, manual?
Real
toothbrush?
Americans don't brush their teeth.
Well, yeah.
Right as this toothbrushing is transpiring, Rhoda bursts in as Hulk Hogan, as we described earlier. And Mary, she knows Mary has exciting news. Rhoda's worried actually that it'll be bad news because Rhoda's always worried something will be bad news. But Mary says, no, I get to actually deliver the editorial monologue on the news tonight. I speak for the management. And when asked about the new format and everything by Rhoda, Mary says, it might not be awful, especially now that we have Gordy. And even Rhoda's like, what are you going to do about Ted, though? He's going to be upset about this. And Mary says, we've already figured that out. We've just been complimenting his jacket all week, and he's distracted. Back at WJM, Jack, the executive, comes in, obviously here to make sure that this new format goes as planned and, turns the news into a joke like he wants. He talks with Mary and Ted a little bit before the big show. Spencer pointed this out. When we pan across the room, we see Ted and Gordy wearing red corduroy blazers over white turtlenecks and plaid pants. This is another distinctly 70s styling.
When they wear red, they fucking wear red.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
There's a lot going on there visually.
Which is interesting, too, because it is a 70s show, so all the colors are muted from the filming technique. The red is not.
No.
The red is just as clear as day, red as can be.
Very
It's
vibrant.
like as red as Ralph Waite's skin in those Waltons episodes.
After a handful of bourbons.
Must be St. Louis Cardinals opening day with all these red jackets. That's a really narrow reference.
I got it.
While Jack's doing all this glad handing with his staffers, with his people, he accidentally reveals to Ted that Ted will kind of have the thankless job of being the straight man, something Ted was not aware of because of all the jacket compliments.
And Ted would totally be the guy who thinks he's personable and everyone loves him. So being the straight man would not be something he wants to be
and
at
he
all.
wouldn't even understand that also, like, that's a valuable resource. He doesn't understand this at all. It gets worse when Jack tells him Gordy's going to be the next big thing in the news. Ted's visibly upset now, and Mary tries to stop him from flipping shit and causing a problem, assuring him, look, Ted, don't show your personality. You don't really have one to show. Ted then sits down next to Gordy to give him a piece of his mind.
Think you're pretty good, eh, Garno? Well, we'll see who's the funny guy around here. We're on the air, Ted.
So right away, Ted's off to a rollicking start, and you might think, oh, that'll scare Ted back into doing his job. It does not. Back in the newsroom, the rest of the staff's watching the show unfold. Lou and Murray know it's going to be a train wreck, so they've just got a bottle of scotch out and a glass, and they're ready to just see what happens. And what happens is Ted immediately tries to tell a Polish joke.
Which is so great.
And we cut away from that right away, of course, to Gordy telling a humorous story everyone likes about a man in a bunny suit. Ted, of course, has to cut that one off and say, that's not funny. Then Gordy tries to start the headline story of the night, and Ted's alarm bells in his head start to go off.
Another development in Washington today. The president signed into law.
Hey, wait a minute. That's the president's story. That's mine. I think I'm supposed to do that, Gertie.
What's the difference, Ted? I've already started it.
But then it's a president's story. I was here first, and I always get the president's story.
Ugh, Ted's awesome.
That's great.
At this point, Mary runs back into the newsroom to see Lou and Murray, waves papers around looking anguished, can't say anything, and then leaves again. And Lou correctly deduces, she might have wanted our opinion on the format as they drink more, which really she wants to offer hers, which is this is a disaster. Back on TV, Ted gets handed a bulletin of apology to the Polish-American community for his earlier insensitive remarks, and of course has no clue that he said anything insensitive in the first place. Gordy then says we'll be back with further apologies later. In the newsroom, Lou and Murray are talking about whether they're drinking scotch or bourbon now. They've moved on to bourbon. They're done with the scotch. And on screen, Gordy cuts to Mary so she can do the editorial she discussed earlier. And it's now that Mary talks candidly about population control and how it is very quickly doubled in another segment that is very presaging.
I will say, she says in the little bit that if things go as they're going, we'll have a population over 7 billion by the year 2000.
We didn't.
I looked up, we were at like 6.1 billion.
6.14. Yeah, we're 7.88 now.
We did it, guys.
Yeah. Well, but I bet you, if we hadn't curbed anything at all, we would have been. And we're doing a piss poor job, but,
This show, man, it knew what was up all that time ago.
While Mary is trying to deliver this monologue to the camera, though, Ted he doesn't get that this is a different part of the show, really, and he keeps trying to interrupt with little jokes.
He's like riffing.
This should also be informal. Like, totally not understanding the point. This also, to me, serves as another example of like a man just interrupting a woman constantly and saying, hey, quit being all gloomy about this serious stuff. Take it easy. Have a beer.
Have some scotch.
Eventually, Mary breaks and screams at Ted to shut up, which becomes probably the favorite thing that's ever happened for Lou. We move to the next day. We're in Lou's office. Mary comes in with more telegrams, yes, telegrams, complaining about last night's show. There are complaints, of course, from the Polish-American Society, the Zero Population Growth Society, and of course the FCC for all of the Ted stuff, you have to assume. Mary apologizes to Lou, but Lou counters, hey, you shouldn't be making $50 a week less than your predecessor, and offers her $25 a week more. And she says, nope, not going to do it. It's got to be the full 50. I really like this, too. He offers her 25. She says no, and he goes, got to be the full 50, doesn't it? Kind of resigned, like, yeah, I was going to, okay, fine. And he does. He gives it to her at this point. Ted walks in right as all this is transpiring and asks why on earth would Lou give a raise to someone who just told him to shut up on the air. And Lou says, because that's all I could afford.
Oh, zing.
Zinger.
Burn.
That's the end of the episode, and I think a very good one.
Yeah.
Well, like I said at the beginning of the episode, hated this. After the first watch through, I was annoyed. Katie and I sat there and watched it, and I was just thinking that just how shrill she was and just the way things went, and just was unhappy. And I stopped. I didn't watch the second one. It was a few days later when I finally sat down, watched the second one, laughed my ass off. Then another day later, I wrote my notes and watched the first one again and thought, okay, I'm going to back off. I like this episode.
That happens a lot in the shows we pick for Boob Tube Boys, to be fair. You get a lot of opportunities to do just what you said.
Yeah.
So this one didn't do that to you then. Good. Good job.
Nope.
Good job, Mary Tyler Moore.
I liked it.
Well, and this is the rare show we've covered where there's even another layer to find.
Yeah, that's true. It's very pointed and deeper than a lot of the shows.
Yeah, for sure.
This is very fun for me to hear from you guys, too, because, like, again, I have such a childhood association with the show. While I can certainly evaluate it a lot better now as an adult, I do have, fondness for it that's going to just always be there.
I think one problem I have anytime I will watch older shows like 70s or 80s era, maybe sitcoms, sometimes dramas, particularly sitcoms, is even if I think it's funny, I'll think, I'll probably never watch that again. I could totally watch some Mary Tyler Moore's.
I wound up watching like a dozen of them. I'll probably watch some more sometime. But like one of the things this show did is increase the joke quotient you can have in a show and kind of thread it together better to avoid that boredom. Like you mentioned, Van, I think a lot of the downbeat moments in shows that would be boring are made better here because you have those character moments.
Yeah. What did you think, Spencer? Did you overall like it?
I did. Actually, I had more thoughts that we covered in this one about, honestly, the nature, like I said, they go right into it and being progressive in this one instantly with all of its most important topics. They kind of hit you over the head with that right at the beginning, and I didn't mind. I thought it was fine. I liked how Mary Tyler Moore was presented in this episode just fine. I didn't have any problems with it. The second one that we'll talk about next week, I actually didn't have many thoughts on it until the very end when I realized kind of what they were going for. I was suddenly like, wow, that's a really cool point they're making. This one, I was just kind of the whole way through, I was getting what they were trying to do, and I thought it was well done.
I think both of these episodes do a good job. By the way, both are, especially the next one, but this one on some, both are pretty high up on the list of Mary Tyler Moore best episodes, and for different reasons. This one, I think, rightfully was praised for bringing up just a lot of prescient issues.
Done so well, too. It didn't ever feel like it was over the top. And if they did kind of take on an issue that really doesn't have there's not really a good solution to this problem with the wage gap, you can't really say that that's going to get fixed. So they know they can't truly give an answer to that, but how they handle it within the frame of the episode is about as good as you can, I think. It doesn't ever feel preachy or anything, but they're bringing this stuff up, and obviously stuff that wasn't brought up hardly at all in that time period.
And there are a couple of different ways that shows tend to push those agendas or narratives. Again, it was done deftly here and subtly, which was important. The other way is like the Walker, Texas Ranger way, where everything ends up roses.
Yeah.
Like everything's great by the end of the show. Or the other way is like the Avatar way, where they just beat you over the fucking face.
And everybody's blue.
And I'm sensitive to that too. I think many people are, but even if it's a good message, sometimes you can do it in a bad way. Like it's like I don't like what you're doing here.
Yeah, if you man, as a person who listens to a lot of punk type music, lyricism can often be just so unartful.
Sure.
In a way, even
good meaning.
Even in good intent, and like, yeah, exactly, Spencer. Like my alert is always up for that, and if it takes away from the actual art you're making,
you failed.
You can't do it. Yeah, and this show just, I mean, it only enhances it. The more I thought about it this week, I thought about it in contrast to the Waltons, the show airing at the exact same time.
And it is also contrast to Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah.
I think if the wage gap, first of all, Chuck Norris would probably approve of the wage gap, but if he didn't and he wanted to get rid of it, he would just kick it. He would roundhouse kick that wage
and then
gap.
offer it a water.
I think what he would do, and this is legit what I think how Walker, Texas Ranger would handle it, is they would say there's a wage gap. He would discover there's a wage gap. He would then take money out of his own pocket to pay so that everyone's equal. And then they would say, problem solved everywhere.
Yeah.
Like
see,
we
no
solved
wage
it for the
gap,
world.
you know, and also you don't have to get me anything for Christmas.
That's not even what Christmas is about, Brian. I was thinking too, he might incorporate it into, there should be a wage gap for what I do, because there's not going to be a woman Texas Ranger that you'll feel safe with like me. So come on, women can't do my job as well as I can.
I mean, we've seen Nia Peoples kick, but she can't kick like Chuck Norris.
No one can.
Also, I'm currently playing Pokemon, and there's a Pokemon named Hitmonlee, and he just kicks. He has long feet.
Oh, good for him.
And I nicknamed my Hitmonlee Nia after Nia Peoples.
Oh, that's a good idea. It's either that or Seamus. You know, one of those two things.
One hand, the other.
Another thing I really like about the scene, though, where Mary's talking with Lou about the possibility of getting a raise, and she's upset about the pay gap, is that it is Mary, the character that at this point in the show has been the main character and is nationally likable. Consider that. So you're more predisposed to, I mean, the woman's name is the show's name, to say, oh, wait a second. If you're not necessarily in favor of equal pay, like the star of this show who I like and feel for is in this position.
You want to root for them.
Yeah. So it's wise not to make it a side character. Like not to have Phyllis or Rhoda have a plot that at their unseen job this is going on. But yeah, anything else to add about Season 3, Episode 1, The Good Time News?
You can choose between Hitmonlee, who kicks, and Hitmonchan, who punches, obviously named after Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. I went with Hitmonlee.
I can't disagree with that choice. Solid.
I think it's better. More power in the legs.
I'd have to show you the Pokemon to see how you think. And maybe we'll do that after.
Yeah, we'll see their trunk density.
Hitmonchan wears like a boxer skirt. It's hard to describe. You'll see it, but he's got boxing gloves on.
Do they know any Digimons?
I don't know any Digimons, to be honest.
No, me neither.
I just know the theme song is Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are our champions. That's it. That's all I know about Digimon.
We're gonna Pokemon after all.